Welcome to Little Known Facts, a podcast where you will hear unfiltered, raw, honest, and uniquely funny interviews with artists you love as they talk about the art they love to make. I'm your host, Ilana Levine. But first, a word from my new sponsor, Blue Apron. When it comes to a great meal, not all ingredients are created equal. Fresh, high-quality ingredients make a real difference, so it's important to know where your food comes from. That's why I am loving Blue Apron. With Blue Apron, I can provide for my family home-cooked delicious meals, all for less than $10 a person. This week, Dominic, the kids, and I tried the sweet and sour salmon with bok choy, carrot, and ginger fried rice. It was amazing. And it was so easy, too. Each meal comes with a step-by-step, easy-to-follow recipe card and pre-portioned ingredients that can be prepared in 40 minutes or less. Blue Apron has a special deal right now just for my listeners. Go to blueapron.com/knownfacts, check out this week's menu, and get your first 3 meals for free. And that includes free shipping. You'll love how good it feels and tastes to create incredibly delicious home-cooked meals with Blue Apron. So don't wait. That's blueapron.com/knownfacts. Blue Apron. This is a better way to cook.
Heaven knows I need a little hope for a better day. A little love to find a way through this messy life I made for myself. Someone to say everything's okay.
Little known fact about my guest today, she does a young Shirley Temple impression that rivals, well, the young Shirley Temple. Welcome, J.Smith-Cameron.
Everything's okay.
Hi, everyone. My guest today is the award-winning actress, J.Smith-Cameron. Jay has appeared in numerous theater productions on and off Broadway, but some highlights include Our Country's Good, Crimes of the Heart, Lend Me a Tenor, Tartuffe, Wild Honey, The Memory of Water, Night Must Fall, Fuddy Mears, As Bees and Honey Drown, Juno and the Paycock, Sorry and Sweet and Sad, That Hopey Changey Thing, and The Starry Messenger by her husband, playwright and screenwriter Kenneth Lonergan. She has done too many television shows to mention right now, but some of the highlights include, most recently, the role of Janet Talbot on Rectify, True Blood, The Good Wife, and The Equalizer. My father's favorite, by the way, for you radio listeners. Films include Christine, You Can Count on Me, Jeffrey, The Rage, Carrie 2, Like Sunday, Like Rain, and Margaret, which won her the Best Supporting Actress Award for the International Cinephile Society. She is beloved by everyone who has worked with her, and let's face it, everyone wants to work with her, but I have her today. Welcome, J.Smith-Cameron, to the podcast.
Thank you, Ilana. I'm happy to be here.
It's such a pleasure. The first thing I want to ask you, can you tell us about your name? Because it's a really good one.
I'm happy to hear you say that because it's an odd name. Well, I grew up as Jeannie Smith in South Carolina. And then sometime in high school and college, I started just going by J.
The letter?
Initial, yeah,
Okay.
the initial J. And it was just J. Smith, which I sort of adored being because it was like being called John Doe or something. It was sort of mysterious, but utterly banal name.
Yeah.
Like Smith is like the most common name. And then J is actually a very common letter, too. So it was
Did
just
you
this kind of
start going
sexless
by
name.
J.
I enjoyed
Smith? You were not sexless, though. Did you? It was college, my friend. Did someone start calling you that? Or like, did you introduce yourself as that? Do you even remember the transformation?
I actually do remember. I do now that you ask because I went to audition for my first thing in at college.
Is this
at
FSU?
Yeah.
Okay.
You had to just sign up on the board, you know, like in the sign-in. And I just put initial J. Smith. Because I guess in the back of my mind, I kind of liked that better than Jeannie Smith, which sounded like a little girl's name. Now it sounds delightful. I wouldn't mind being called Jeannie, but there's nothing wrong with Jeannie.
Jeannie Smith, I'm very young. I'm very young. I'm way too young for this part. I'm Jeannie
now
Smith.
friends with Jeannie Berlin, and I feel like it's a secret society to be named Jeannie. It's
The
kind of cool.
Jeannies?
Yeah, I like that name. I never disliked the name. I just somehow was going through a time where I liked that idea of just having more
mystery.
I don't know. So I just wrote J. Smith. So anyway, then they called my name out, J. Smith. And I was too shy and awkward to explain that I just signed up my initial. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I started being called J. Smith. And then some people who knew me from before that were like, wait, are you J now? And I was like, yes, I'm J now. I'm Madam X. I'm J.
I shall not answer if you say Jeannie.
Jeannie who? Then, though, I dropped out of college because I got a theater job offer. But before I did that, I had made a film. While I was in Florida, I'd made a film by Victor Nunez.
He's very famous now.
He's famous, and he's wonderful.
Wait, did he do
filmmaker.
Ruby in Paradise?
Yes.
Okay, he's
That
a beautiful
wonderful
filmmaker.
one. Yes.
Yeah.
And Yuli's Gold. And his first film was called Gal Youngin.
Okay.
And
was that a short or a long?
No, it was
okay.
a full-length film, and it was based on a short story by Marjorie Kennan Rawlings, who wrote The Yearling. I don't know if you remember that movie and that story. And she's a beautiful writer.
So you were in college with him?
No.
Oh,
I just
while
auditioned.
you were in college.
They needed a
This
teenager.
has nothing to do with college.
It's just coincidental.
Okay.
It was shooting near, not even in Tallahassee,
Okay.
where FSU is, but outside of Gainesville, where Marjorie Kennan Rawlings' farm was. And but they were trying to hire an actual 14-year-old. So they looked in colleges because that would be kind of a hybrid to play this young part, which wasn't the lead but was the title role. And so I got picked to do it, and I did that. And it was a very, very, very low-budget, non-SAG film. I never thought it would see the light of day. I hoped it would. And right about the time I finished my job in Kentucky, my theater job, I decided to move to New York, and that film was playing at the Independence part of the New York Film Festival. So I had been billed in the film as J. Smith. And then in the interim, I joined Equity, and I couldn't be Initial Smith, because there were too many people I could be mistaken with. So a lot of people in my generation have three names, John, Benjamin, Hickey, and so forth, because they have,
there were too many of them.
Right, at least at the time when they joined up, let's say. So I'd either change my first or last name or add a name. So Cameron was a family name. Technically on my birth certificate, I'm Jean Isabel.
Oh.
And both Jean and Isabel were Camerons.
Okay.
And my great-grandmother, my grandmother. So I just tacked that on the end, and I kind of called Victor Nunez because the film was already printed as credits were J. Smith, and I said,
you went to every copy of the film.
No, it's just J. Smith in the film. But his answer was it was just printing the posters because it had just gotten distribution, and so it had J. Smith - Cameron. I'd never thought of the dash or anything, because for a while it was just J. Cameron when I joined Equity.
Okay.
So J. Smith - Cameron was right when I moved to town, and there was a little ad in the Times advertising the movie, and I was trying to meet agents, so I just used that name, and I thought I'll figure it out later because it sounded a bit pretentious to me, actually. And then people kind of quite liked it, So
who do you feel like now? Like you've probably been J.Smith-Cameron longer than you were Jeannie Smith,
That's
right?
correct.
I mean, just barely. But just today. So who do you feel like?
My mom calls me Jeannie sometimes. I like being Jeannie, but no, everyone calls me Jay. I guess I feel like Jay.
It's happened.
Yeah, it confuses people. People leave out the hyphen, or they switch the Smith and Cameron, or they...
But you're not confused, and that's really the most important thing.
I'm a little confused.
Well,
about a lot of things.
But not your name. Did you act as a kid?
No.
So was college the beginning of your fascination with it? In high school?
I guess that's a kid, right?
Yeah.
But I wasn't like a child actor.
Do you remember what your first play was?
Duh, yeah. My first role was Anne Frank in The Diary of Anne Frank.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. At Greenville Senior High School in Greenville, South Carolina.
Were there a lot of Jewish people in Greenville, South Carolina?
There were some Jewish people.
There were. You weren't. Yeah. They weren't like, what is this?
What's a Jew? No, there was.
Glad you brought this to our attention. That's a very sad history.
It's such a beautiful play. I wish high schools would do plays like that more often. Like really substantial plays. Nellie just did my daughter just did the Laramie Project at Elizabeth Irwin.
The Matthew Shepard story revealed by the people who lived in the town, sort of different perspectives.
Yes, Moises Kaufman and his theater company went to Laramie, Wyoming, and talked to everybody, and then they tried to piece together. So the play is less about Matthew than it is about the community and all narrative. The different things that could make something like that happen, and the reaction to it.
Wow, that's kind of amazing.
Yeah, it's really amazing.
What grade is she in?
She's in 9th grade.
So they're really
that was
working
very
on heady
substantial.
material.
Yeah.
Wow. Is she interested in acting?
I think so. I mean, she's interested in all of it. Her dad's a writer, and she's interested in that too, I think, and in directing, and she plays electric guitar, so she's got many interests.
I feel like every child I meet in New York City, and this may be true all around the world, they're all like Renaissance children.
They are
like,
rock stars.
It's incredible to me.
Incredible.
I know. As mad as I am at the internet in some ways, I feel like my children Google a lot of things, and I just feel like, oh, I guess you can just Google how to do Shakespeare or how to be a rock star or like where to take.
Well,
I mean, it's the beginning of some sort of like.
I am not sure about that because there's also a lot of BS on the
That's
internet.
true.
But I do think that like growing up in New York is this like treasury of stimuli and everything's accessible.
And you can hang out at the Met instead of the
Yeah,
mall.
man.
I mean, there are opportunities.
Yeah,
to
and you
kind
don't
of,
get in your car and drive for 45 minutes to get somewhere. You hop on and off a subway or
Yeah.
you walk down the street and there's this sense of your fellow humans. And that's just very conducive to the arts, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So just to go back, because you did not grow up in Manhattan, you grew up in South
Greenville,
Carolina.
South Carolina.
Although you have a very sort of light trace of a Southern accent at this point. I know you could probably do it more fully.
When
on
I'm down
request.
south, I slip
Do
back.
you?
Yes.
Are there expressions that you still use sometimes that are particularly Southern in your life
Well, I
now?
say y'all, but,
Uh-huh.
but lots of people say y'all. That's no longer
But yours
just
is a legit y'all. It's not
y'all.
like a
No,
put on of some kind.
No. But that's it, I think.
And you're married to such a true blue New Yorker,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Born and bred.
So you really have like a merger of
Yeah.
these two
And my
worlds.
daughter has,
It's full on.
full-on New Yorker.
Yeah,
so
yeah,
I
yeah.
feel like a stranger in a strange land, sort of, there.
All right,
And when
well-
I was doing Rectify, which shot in Georgia, I made a point of every time Nellie had a winter or spring break while we were shooting and could come down and stay with me, we traveled all over the Southeast, and I got to show her my sort of world I came from because
Yeah.
it's culturally so different.
So let's go back a little bit because your body of work is so rich and full of characters that are so diverse in terms of their backgrounds and their dreams and their stumbling blocks, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if we can just go back a little bit, it sounds like by the time you went to college, there was an interest in theater in terms of where you picked where you wanted to go.
Right, exactly.
And you went to FSU, which isn't crazy for a Southerner. It wasn't
It's big
the other
theater-
side of the
school-
world.
School of theater, not
right.
a department.
And you
Yeah.
would have heard of it where you were living. But then it sounds like you left in the middle. And some of your teachers are here.
dropout. Just
And we
say
have a
it,
few of your
Alana.
past professors here, and they want to ask you about that. So was
I
our
couldn't
country's
pass Math
good?
101.
I know. And you know what I do when I can't pass something? I quit.
Yeah,
And
I'm a
that is
quitter.
my suggestion.
Quitter.
Anyone who's like,
I ran
just
away
stick
and
with
joined
it.
the circus. That's basically
Quite
what I did.
literally.
Yeah, kind of.
So was it Our Country's Good? Was that the play that they were doing in Kentucky at the time, or was it something else that you left school for?
Oh, no.
That was much
no,
later.
I just got offered like a regional theater job and then another regional theater
So
job.
you
another
started
re-
auditioning,
Yeah,
like, how did
instead
that
of college,
happen?
I did regional theater.
So the first one you got, were you like in your dorm room, kind of like, oh, I want to like?
A
how did that
former
happen?
professor
Yes.
at Florida State had started a children's theater in Louisville, Kentucky.
Okay.
And he kind of coaxed me to sort of stop out of school and be in his company. So I did a season of that, and then I did some more of that, and then I auditioned for a regional theater that I don't think exists anymore in Miami, Florida, and I had all these really cool parts. Like I got to play Ophelia and Agnes and Agnes of God and all these,
Wow.
plays that had been on Broadway 5 years before or something. Marcia Norman's play, Getting Out, I got to do that. I had all these great parts, and I would have been, about the time I would have been a junior in college, so it was kind of great. So instead of going back to college then, I kind of came to New York and just tried my luck at that.
So
And,
tell us about that.
well, I moved to New York. Gal Youngin, as I mentioned before, was opening at the film festival. And so I kind of thought, I didn't know if I was moving there forever, but I thought I would give it a go. And I stayed with college friends on their couches and stuff. And I auditioned a bunch. I got some more regional theater jobs, blah, blah.
Are these through backstage? Are these through people you know? Do you have an
I met
agent
some
yet?
agents. I met some agents through like people I had worked with regionally, got me introductions. So I wasn't signed with any agent, but I was like being sent
Freelancing.
out. Freelancing, we call it.
Yes.
And but I auditioned for the tour of Crimes of the Heart. And I was doing a Shakespeare play out of town, and I got a phone call. And this is in the days of payphones, in olden times. And on my break, I had to go and call my person I was working with then.
Oh, I thought bells are ringing.
No, I got that message, and then I did.
Do you remember if it rang if it rang, then you knew you didn't have a message, so you didn't have to waste the quarter. And then if it picked up right away, you knew that there was a message for you, something like that.
This was like on my calling card because I was in Pennsylvania calling New York, calling the manager I was working with at the time. And he said, well, I have good news and bad news. The bad news, they canceled the tour of Crimes of the Heart. And I said, okay, well, what's the good news? And he went, well, the good news is that Maya Dillon's given notice and they want you to play her role on Broadway.
Oh, my God.
So my first acting job in New York, me, this little, idiot, basically, from down south.
That's what it said. That's how it described you. J.Smith-Cameron, this little idiot. Yeah.
My first job in New York was
on Broadway.
Yeah.
Who was the director of that play?
Melvin Bernhardt.
Who else was in the cast?
Holly Hunter was in the cast. And Elizabeth McKay was still in the cast. She was the original Lenny. And
who played Barnett? Do you remember?
Tim Choate.
Okay.
Tim Choate. It was really remarkable.
So I played Babe in college.
What a great part for you.
I just have to say it was great. And I just remember like phrases like Mama's gardening gloves and things like that. But it was like the most heartbreaking, fun, poignant, and her writing is so good. And
it's almost like a perfect play.
Yeah, and I love family plays. I love family. I love thinking about families. I think we're all so influenced by it. And did you just keep going from there?
I would like to say that it was just Broadway from then on out, but it was
but
not
you
like
can
that.
say it because it's my podcast, and you can say whatever you want.
We'll rewrite history.
Yes.
No, I had, then I had some more regional theater and new plays off and off Broadway, which are, always the best jobs anyway. And
let's make listeners really mad. Did you ever not have a job since you started? Let's just make them so mad right now. Maybe not all like the highest paying jobs on the planet, but was there ever a real drought, really, once you left FSU?
Now that you say it, not a real drought, because sometimes by choice I would, or by necessity for, like right now, I'm not doing plays right now because my mom is not doing well. No, my mom's not doing well, and I just want to be free to spend time with her. But by the same token, not always doing the jobs I wished I was doing.
Right.
So.
You can leave now. Thank you very much.
Sorry. You asked me.
You can go. Let me see. Do I have any questions that will make me feel better? Well, when there were times where you felt like you weren't getting the jobs you wanted, there were lots of jobs that you were getting, and obviously the theater has just demanded that you come back over and over again, and you make it look so effortless. Do you have a process that you started out with that you feel like you still come back to each time? And can you talk a little bit about how you work? And is it different from one medium to the other?
Oh, those are all good questions.
Thank you.
Well, first of all, the first thing you started to ask, or what I thought you were asking,
what
there
was I
was
asking?
a point
Help me.
when I was getting a lot of kind of fun girl next door sort of parts. Those are great parts, but like those sort of innocent ingenue roles that are wholesome, or maybe not wholesome, maybe they're psycho bunny kind of parts, but they're young and blank slate kind of parts. And I really wanted to play more character-y parts, by which I mean just quirky, interesting, or tough characters, or squirrely characters. I wanted to play sort of more extravagant kind of bold characters. And I had to really kind of push and shove a little bit to be thought of that way, I think. Like I played Maggie in Lend Me a Tenor for a full year of my life. Commercial hit on Broadway.
Right.
And I had signed the contract. None of us thought it would run that long, but I was in it for one full year. And it was a delightful role. But I was like, I'm kind of a nut. And this is sort of the straight part. Like I want to play the, really itchy, weird parts. So
when Freddie Mears comes along, that was sort of the dream of the kind of part.
Yeah. There have been a lot of parts like that, but I had to really kind of elbow my way into that terrain. I had to kind of hold out for it. Or like I would be offered part X and I was like, can I read for part Y? And then, maybe I wouldn't get them, but people would be like, oh, she kind of did all right with part Y.
Do you still audition?
Yeah.
What was the first play you were offered? Do you remember that you didn't have to audition for? You might not remember because you've been doing this a very long time.
I don't know. I don't know.
Okay.
That's a good question.
It's such a gratifying thing, though, right?
Yes.
Like, it's such
wonderful.
a gratifying
And
thing.
basically in theater, I feel like I don't really audition for theater, but I'm willing to audition for theater. But I feel like they now know, I've been doing it for 30 years. So, but I certainly audition for films and television, as often as I can.
Did you audition for Rectify?
I sure did.
You did? Sometimes my friends will say, you know what? Those best, big, shiniest jobs that sort of change things for me, ironically, that was the easiest for me to get. And then the other things were more...
Yeah, a little bit like that. I mean, the casting people for that, they thought of me, I think. And Ray didn't know who I was.
Mm-hmm. Ray McKinnon
did not know who I was. And my agent, Lindsay Porter, who's also my chum, she was like, Jay, you have to read this. And Libby thinks you're really right for this. And I concur. And it's really special. This is a really unique script. And I opened it and by the time I'd finished page 1 of the script, my jaw had dropped. I was just rapt. I've been waiting kind of to play a Southern
matriarch.
Yes, like women, not unlike my mother, that observed growing up, that were sort of demure, but like you might say, an iron butterfly or a steel magnolia, that are sort of tougher than they look, but they're also kind of ladylike, Rosalind Carter-ish. That's how I saw that character.
Yes,
sort of.
Very much. That's so interesting that you say that. As I think of the absolutely poised and composed with so much bubbling.
Yes, a
right
ocean
underneath.
Inside.
Yeah.
And intelligent, very intelligent character. So I read, and I just think it was struck the right chord with Ray as well as Libby and June.
Was Ray in the room the first time you read, or did you have to film
I went
it
on
and then
I went on tape, and then I flew out for a screen test, and then I got it. Yeah, it was kind of like, it's one of those things that I guess when they think you're right for it, it just is less of an uphill battle. Yeah.
So there's a film that your husband wrote and directed called Margaret. For people listening, it's an incredible film, and I recall there's like 2 versions of it, sort of the released version and then a longer version of it that Kenny was really happy to get out in the world. It clocks in at 3 hours or something.
Yeah, just under, I think.
And that is the version that I watched.
Oh,
and there's a scene in it where Jay's character, who plays Anna Paquin's mother, and Jay plays an actress, a New York theater actress in it. And there's a scene where she's talking to the incredible Jeannie Berlin, who you mentioned earlier, of the Jeannie Club, who gives a staggering performance along with everyone else in this movie, where you talk about how you've been doing theater for a long time, and it's nice when something you do gets recognized, although that's not why we do it, but that earlier you had done a TV show for 2 seconds, and finally...
Exactly right.
Right. And I remember it resonated for me, and you're like, and suddenly my family and friends like, oh my God, you're, and it was
you're
like
somebody now.
You're somebody.
Yeah.
It's like, it doesn't matter if the TV show is any good or not, but suddenly you're legitimate in some way. And I know that you have done The Equalizer and other series in your life.
You mentioned that.
It's like, because my dad really
and about
loved
10 episodes of Law and Order, like everyone else, right?
Yes,
of
but
all the different
I just
Law and Orders.
remembered my father really liked that show. Yeah, in the good way. I mean, in a million things, but Rectify to me just seems like an opportunity for you to do the kind of work that you've been doing in the theater for so long on screen. That character is very complicated.
Yeah.
And being asked to deal with a scenario that's almost unthinkable.
Yeah.
It's like that game, like what could be, as a parent, like
Right.
what are the 4 worst things that you could possibly
Oh, my
imagine?
God, what a
And short of
dreadful game.
actually losing your child.
Right.
Losing your child in this way, I don't think it's spoiling anything to say that Rectify is about a family whose son, after 20 years of being incarcerated and on death row, is released through a glitch in the DNA.
They find DNA that's not his.
Thank you.
Right. So he's not – his sentence is vacated. He's still a suspect.
Jay just embodies the complicated response to something like that.
Thank you. Well, that script was unusually good, but nowadays, I'm sure you've talked about this with other people, that there's so many interesting things on television. It's just a kind of a bonanza of like all different kinds of, all shapes and sizes of parts, and it's really thrilling. And Rectify is certainly like the epitome of that, like a show you couldn't imagine having been made 10 years earlier. Like,
no, and
who would
also
pay for that to be made?
On Sundance, and it's finding its audience, even though it's not on a network or a more a larger cable station. Right. It was 4 seasons or 5?
4.
4. And you have finished.
We finished shooting, and the 4th season's airing now.
Right. So what is it, do you think, about that show that has resonated so deeply for people?
Well, I think that just what you said, I think the complicated, nuanced writing, the characters, it's very character-driven. The characters and the dialogue are so specific, and it also has this leisurely pace, which is not to say that it's boring because it's very dense. It's very full. Like, there's a lot going on that's unspoken, and so it's, or at least to my taste, it's very, intriguing, I would say. And I think people really responded to that because it's not the sort of usual TV pace of like, sensational thing after sensational thing grabbing you and frantically pushing on, It's almost like reading a novel. Mm-hmm. It's got a different, so I think it has a very specific audience, but that audience is very happy to find it.
Absolutely. So to get back to how you work, earlier I asked if there's sort of a process that you approach. I mean, obviously theater has rehearsal and television and film for the most part do not, right? So how
beautiful.
have
what a
you,
beautiful thing.
I know, it seems indulgent at this
I
point. Although I do know that Kenny had mentioned on Margaret that he tried to at least get a block of rehearsal time.
Quite a lot, yeah.
So did you rehearse that movie like a play, or was it more gentle touching on scenes?
We rehearsed it a bit like a play. We didn't stage it.
But did you do it in order? Did you work on scenes in order?
No, we just sort of we would rehearse, like I would rehearse all my scenes with Anna, like all clumped together, and then like I didn't get to rehearse with Jean Reno because he wasn't in the country beforehand or whatever. But
also you guys meet each other in the movie,
that's
so
true.
It's also right. Like it's like you had to establish a 17-year-long relationship.
That's true.
Can you talk about what it's like being directed and working with someone you're married to?
I love it, but I don't know what. I don't know what Kenny
we'll
would say. Kenny, I've heard him a couple times say, "Oh, she's tough. She's really tough."
What do you think he means by that?
Well, because I think he's always surprised how. I mean, this is going to sound like I'm blowing my own horn, but he's always a little taken aback by how thoroughly I've thought it through. Right. So he'll go like, she's probably feeling quite frustrated here. It's like, and then I babble for 45 minutes about just how frustrated my character is, and he's like, okay. Oh, I'm sorry to say. Gee whiz. And so that kind of happens. But all of his insights are really good. I mean, he's a very, very good director with actors. Like his what makes his writing so good is the acting in it. Like, he kind of really gets inside those characters, each one of them. He's really good at that. The only thing that I would say was, I thought, a disadvantage was that, we were shooting this big movie. It was a very ambitious, kind of epic sort of movie.
Sure.
Shooting in Manhattan, where Manhattan is actually
alive.
New York City is a character in it,
yes.
Basically.
Very much so.
So it was a big project, and we had a little child. So
how old was Nellie when you did this movie?
5 or 6, something like that.
Does she appear in the film?
Yes, she does, very briefly at the beginning, sort of in the credit sequence, or right around there.
In Rectify, just down for a minute, when there's a picture of you in the opening credits, is that Nellie?
Yes, it is.
Oh, so sweet.
Kenny took that photograph.
That's so sweet.
Yeah.
Anyway, there's a picture of Jay holding a baby in the opening credits of Rectify. Now we know who the baby is.
Now baby's Nellie.
It would be weird if you were holding her now. Like that.
That would be weird, and it wouldn't be a good match for Daniel. You would never think that might be Daniel.
No, that would be bad. That would be bad. So you have this child.
I would want to ask him things about the scene the next day, but it would be about like who's going to call about the heat that's not working, or who's going to pick up Nellie, or it would. So
domestic
I would have to
schedule
time to talk with them,
right? And
he would get sort of annoyed with me But he wouldn't be annoyed if I'd just been an actress that he only saw on set. He'd be very, So my friend, and your friend too, Kim Parker, right?
Yes,
Pippin's wife, Kim. I always have this or that question about the scene. I could never get his attention about it. And she said, "You should just write on your ass."
Yeah.
And scene 35, when I say blah,
what the
blah,
hell
blah,
am I doing?
Yeah, so
what do you mean?
Then you get his attention.
Yes, that's a really good idea. You should try. I'm going to do that for all sorts of things in my marriage.
That's right. May I order those curtains now?
Oh my God! Just after being married this long. long. Just literally, it could even just be on the back of like, I don't know, ski pants. Like the expectation of seeing anything under the ski pants, it doesn't even matter. Just that I'm thinking of him.
Yes, that's right.
I'm actually thinking of him in some way would feel really good. Well, that movie, I just feel like there was so much, when you say New York is a character, it's pretty thrilling to see any film that kind of has a love letter to New York within its design is really, for me, special. And knowing how much this city has meant to him in his own life and that he could, I'm saying it so terribly and I feel bad because Kenny is the greatest writer in the world, but
You're not saying it terribly.
Something about the way it was another character in the film and especially in the long cut, how lovingly and how much time he spent allowing the architecture and the visuals of the city to be as much a part of the film as the other parts is kind of extraordinary.
I think one of the sort of leitmotifs of it is that as dramatic as what Anna's character is going through, that every time you see a long shot of like rear windows on a building or taxi cabs going up Madison Avenue, in every one of those cabs is some big drama of that person and that person, and the person next to you on the subway is going through some major thing, and it's over and over in the movie, like overheard conversations. And
totally.
When in the cut you saw where I'm in the clinic waiting for Lisa to, for me to be called in to see Lisa. I don't want to give anything away.
Yeah.
There's all these close-ups of the day players that day, and my character looking at them and wondering what their circumstances are.
And
they were wonderful actors he found to be like the bystanders at the bus accident, like the
By the way, and Allison Janney as the victim, it's I mean that's like that moment is
that scene is a masterpiece, frankly, I think. I mean,
yeah,
it's remarkable.
You should write that on your ass.
Yeah, man. Trying to think how to phrase it.
Sweetie, that scene. So I had asked on Twitter for people to write in if they had any questions for you.
And no one wrote any questions.
No, they did. And so one person, they wanted to know your phone number and your address. And I said I would totally get that today. So someone wanted to know if you considered writing and if that's something that's in your life and something that you dabble in or with.
That's so funny because that just kind of came up recently on another interview.
There's no other interview. I don't know what you're talking about.
Not a little known fact podcast, but just a run-of-the-mill interview.
Thank you.
That I did write a short story when I was in my 20s. One short story that I finished, and a friend of mine sent in to a magazine, and it got published. I don't even think that it was a literary journal, and I'm not even sure it's in. I don't think it exists anymore. But I did. I used to really have aspirations, but when you live with a writer like Kenneth Lonergan, it tends to make you sort of clam up. I think you don't want to be the rank amateur working your way through something. But he's quite the opposite. He often encourages me to write, and like he'll hear stories about my childhood in Greenville. And in fact, the short story I wrote was about Greenville. And he was like, you should just start writing down these scenes. And I go, what would it be about? And he went, you'll find that out. You'll find that out. Just write them. But I guess I'm basically just very lazy and second place chicken. So I'm not much of a writer, but I do think about it. And I feel like that's kind of my orientation as an actor, that I sort of think about the writing and I pick up all the clues from the writing, and I'm very interested in that, in the writerliness of something,
I remember years ago when I was teaching a class, you were a guest and you talked a little bit about process with my student actors. I was working through the Naked Angels Theater Company and we had started a school, and you talked about learning lines, and you said one of the ways in which you learned lines is at first you just read them over and over and over again without effect or affect. And I think that was in particular for maybe auditions when you had a lot of material to learn. But in terms of, I guess the point was before you started making choices, you were becoming as familiar with the lines as possible and then seeing organically.
Yeah, and reading the other person's lines so that you kind of know the whole story of the scene without already jumping on with a decision about how to play it, because you don't have those that time around the table like you have in your rehearsal play and the time, just getting on your feet and all that. You have to kind of have your own process in private in a vacuum, and it's tricky.
Can you talk a little bit about your process now?
One thing I always advise people to do, and I do. I mean, my one little secret I would say is that I like to sort of study people just on the subway or like when you're waiting in line at Starbucks or whatever. Just study them and try to see how many things you can intuit, or even if it's just a guess, you might be wrong, but what you pick up, what minutia you pick up, and what you can kind of by osmosis figure out about their mood and try to figure out how old they are and if they're in a relationship and what's worrying them, and study them and then kind of see what's interesting to you about people. And then it's sort of like you're developing this huge library of characters.
Mm-hmm.
And then you might get a part, an audition for a part that you're like, oh, it's like that woman who was with all the bags on the end of the subway talking to herself. Or
Right.
It's like that mother who was really cross with her child, but you got the feeling she was a very good mother, or whatever. Like, you. So I don't know if that's a process.
Right, but you have this big suitcase that you bring in
Yes,
kind
and then
of
I'm-
filled.
And it's so fun to do. It's so fun to
Yeah.
do. And New York's, of course, the place for it. I think that's the best advice I have for all actors and beginning actors is to kind of mark people that you see and study them, and then let that spark your imagination.
So in Rectify, or things that you've had to do that, even I thought a lot about in the films that I've watched and the TV shows that I've watched with you, you seem to have tremendous access to emotion and tremendous access to tears, which can
What
be...
if I burst into tears right now? I kind of
crying.
feel like it.
Well, it's a lot to have people shine a light just on you. It's overwhelming to have to think about oneself so much. I think as actors, we're really comfortable getting into the skins of other
That's
characters.
true, isn't it?
So I appreciate when people come in here knowing that it's not to plug a specific job or film or TV show, but just to talk about life as an artist. It's a very strange position to be in, and I feel such gratitude when my guests come in and share it because there's less protection in a way. But I did notice over the years in watching you, aside from, there's so many things Jay is has an amazing facility for. She could do like 40s dialogue right now. She's just really good at all. She should be in a Henry, is it not Henry Luce? Like, who wrote The Women? There's something about that world.
Right.
Like, you're so fast and so funny and can do lots of accents. And to be able to do such dramatic parts and hilarious parts, and that it all comes out of you is kind of staggering and intimidating. But there is a well of emotion, and I wondered, especially you're playing the mother of a death row convict who's released, and you're constantly dealing with that. Do you worry about having to be tearful when it says that on the page? You're like, oh God, no.
Golly,
Or do you like it?
What? I sort of I don't worry about it. I don't know if I like it, but I don't worry about it. I think that one of the things about being an actor is that you have to have the emotions of your character right under the surface. So I don't think about what comes out, just having it right there. I just try to prepare in terms of, does that make any sense?
It does.
Like right under your skin, like to have everything in the top drawer is right there, because it's often, Ray was often trying to get us not to cry on that show. We're all kind of weepy. And the more interesting thing is sort of trying to contain it.
To fight it.
But that's a really miserable thing to try to imitate. Like you have to really feel that filled up. So I think that when you're working on a part, one of the luxuries of working on a TV series or a big part in a film is that you get to, or in a long run of a play, is you get to inhabit a character for a long time, and you really begin to kind of live in her skin, and you do have those feelings in your top drawer. You know?
Okay, but in the pilot or the first episode, when
that's true.
Because Dominic read for your son, which
Oh my
obviously
gosh.
couldn't have happened. You could have.
Why not?
That would have been a different kind of show. That wouldn't have been the crime, would it? So I remember. I don't even remember what happened. I think I don't know why he isn't doing that show. But when Daniel gets out of jail And first Abigail Spencer goes to greet him, and the family is there, and you go up to him. I don't know how long, if that was day 1 or day 12
That
of
was,
the
I
pilot.
think, literally day 1.
So let's talk about that scene.
Oh, that was actually really difficult because it was never difficult in the audition, or I don't know if I actually did that in the audition, but in the table read,
It was
just
all there.
Yes, it was just because I think that was what grabbed me when I read it. It happens early on in the story, and it was my first day of shooting, maybe the first day of shooting, period, because we had to do the prison scenes when the prison was available. So that the scene that we're talking about, he gets released, and his sister, who has been seeing more of him than the rest of his family has, goes up and hugs him, and she's crying in one sort of way. And then her mother, who's a very buttoned-up kind of character, sort of the dam bursts, and she cries. I was a little bit worried about it because unlike the theater where you just, in a weird way, Kenny's always saying this, that in a weird way theater is more real than films because you just get to do everything in real time and you're reacting to the take that you're really reacting to. And so in an odd way, it's sort of realer. And so that was kind of hard to kind of wait your turn to burst into tears.
That's it, Fitz. You're perfect. I mean, perfect. You were perfect, brother. You were so damn perfect. Hello, Daniel.
Oh, Mother.
Oh, God.
Was that early in the day or late in the day?
Part of it was the adrenaline of it and actually doing that kind of grueling long day.
Helps.
Yes, everything was kind of all raked up. But we were hanging out. We had a kind of holding area in the prison where we would kind of cut up when we would kind of fool around when we weren't shooting because you couldn't maintain that state and then still have it be fresh in front of the camera. So it was a weird juggling act. This is kind of the peek behind the scenes that people who aren't actors don't know, is that when you have to keep coming back to this, really dramatic scene over and over again from different angles, in between there's lots of waiting while they move the lights around and they do this and that. But Adelaide Clemens had brought bananagrams to the set. And so we were making words. And I didn't know anyone really yet. I didn't have any previous friends on that whole job. No one I'd worked with, no one knew who I was. And everyone was nervous. It was everyone's first day. Everyone was scared, and for some reason, all the words, all the letters I got dealt with, all I could come up with were really dirty words, and everyone thought of me as like the lady, like Miss Janet. I remember Ray just being sort of like, "What have I done?" But then we get out there and I'm bursting in tears. So he was like, okay, she's either insane or she's terribly, terribly good. I was very good at bananagrams, but it was very dirty. It was the X-rated version. But that was the hand I was dealt.
Yes, and you used it.
I used it to my
Wow.
advantage.
Did you spend a lot of time with families who are dealing with incarcerated family members?
I would read about it, and it's very interesting and very, obviously painful thing. And there's so many shows now that deal with criminal justice or injustice.
Yeah.
And that is such a horrific and endlessly interesting subject. There's been a lot of shows that have dealt with that, and that Serial podcast, and Making of a Murder, and The Night of, that Jeannie Berlin is in wonderfully. There's just a lot of interest in that right now.
So that's done. The series is not done for those of us who love watching it, unless they do a very special extra episode.
A Christmas special.
A Christmas special.
I'm gonna pitch that.
Yes, could
to
you?
Ray.
He goes back and sees all his friends, his great pals in the prison that he's missed so much. I don't know if your fans are aware. You happen to do one of the most magnificent Shirley Temple impersonations on the planet. And would you be willing, I know it's early in the morning, and so would you be willing to do a little good ship lollipop for the people?
I'll try.
They are demanding it. All right.
Okay.
On the good ship, lollipop, it's a sweet trip to the candy shop, and there you are, happy landing on the chocolate bar. If you eat too much, oh, you'll awake with a tummy ache.
Alana's laughing because she can see my face when I do this, because I can't do the impression without
but this
puckering
is
up
like This
face
is when
like
you're
Shirley
Jeannie
Temple.
Smith again, because you look exactly like you did. I've seen a photo of you at the age of 5, and for some reason, it's a remarkable transformation that vocal exercise you just did in Genius actually it's like Benjamin Button, like you're suddenly. All right, well, I am so grateful to have you on the show, Miss
Thank you,
J.Smith-Cameron. Thank you for being here, lovely.
My great pleasure.
All right, thank
right.
you.
Clouds can make the wind blow, bugs can make the grass grow. So, there you go. These are little known facts that now you know.
If you want more information about my guests, go to the website littleknownfactspodcast.com. I also wanted to tell you that there is now a new addition to the website. It is a button that says contributions. This podcast is a true labor of love, and I really, really want to keep doing it for a long time. So if you like listening as much as I love to do it, please feel free to contribute. It would mean the world to me. Also, on Twitter, you can find me at Alana Levine. Instagram is Little Known Facts Podcast. And on Facebook, Little Known Facts Podcast. You can also feel free to rate and review the show on the iTunes show page. This podcast is recorded at Hanger Studios in New York City. This episode was brought to you by Pro Media. Located in Times Square, Pro Media offers both production and post-production services out of its beautiful studios in the heart of New York City. Pro Media, Sound Vision. Find out more at promedia.nyc.